is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to episode 250 of the Rebel Author Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Sue Campbell, and we're going to be talking all about how to find your ideal reader. But first, to quite a number of comments, actually. So we had some on Daphne's episode. Worderella said, love this episode. I'm also in the camp where my writing is my joyful side hustle, as I like to call it. In fact, I joke that my writing is my retirement plan, and I outsource insurance and my mortgage to my day job. It's freeing and feels rebellious in its own right to think this way. So a couple more comments, Heather, Matt and Camilla all talking about that episode and how they really appreciated hearing from somebody who wanted to do both writing and employment work. So then we had a comment on Inessa's episode, and then some on the Black Heron, which is Patreon only at the moment. So Eden and Marie said, can't wait to see you both at the RWNZ conference next month. And Eden said, it was great to see you at SPS. And I'm finding it increasingly harder to people as I get older. You and me both, Eden. So thank you very, very much for all of those lovely comments. I did read and appreciate all of them. And in the meantime, thank you to everybody. We've had lots of comments on Patreon on the annual Lessons Learned episode, which, as I record this, hasn't actually gone live on to the big bad interwebs. It will go live tomorrow, as I'm recording this early on Tuesday the 2nd of July. But thank you in advance to everybody who's already sent lovely comments, and hopefully everybody else enjoys it as well. In personal news and updates then, because I am recording this early, I am no further forward on the manuscript than I was last time, I think. I can't quite remember exactly where I was, but I am still at around 19,000 words on the manuscript. I forgot. I always underestimate how much in-person things fuck me up. I always think I'm more of an extrovert than I am. I'm definitely not an extrovert. I just die and crumble and left rather rapidly at the end of SPS because I was just exhausted. I was shutting down, basically. And it was only 2 days. I don't really know what happened or why I was so tired. But there we go. And to be perfectly honest, the tired hasn't gone away. It is obviously not SPS or the fact that I did an in-person conference last week anymore. I think it is that my brain is on the shutdown and the rundown to New Zealand now. We are 18 days away from going, and I'm trying desperately hard to clear the decks. I have now outsourced my inbox to somebody, which has been both freeing and terrifying. So we are basically in 18 days, I will no longer have access to my normal emails. I have created a brand new email account that's staying secret, and only my assistants and very close friends will have access to that email, and everything will just get forwarded to me if it needs to be. Otherwise, she's going to deal with it, and I'm super grateful. It feels very freeing and also terrifying that I am relinquishing control of something that only I have been in charge of for years. But also, I just can't cope. Like, I am not coping with anything at the moment, to be honest. I'm really fucking tired. Basically, I remember feeling this way at this time of year last year. And it was right before we went to Turkey when I laid on my arse for 2 straight weeks. And then I felt a lot better, surprising absolutely nobody. And so I know that it's that I'm due a holiday. And I actually think I hate that I'm going to say this. And so many of you are just going to laugh at me because you're going to be like, yeah, I told you so. But essentially, I think I probably need to take more time off. Oh, fuck off, everyone. Oh, God. Excuse me while I just have a chit chat with myself over here. But yeah, I basically think that I need to take more time off. Sorry, I can't even take myself seriously saying that. But it's true. It's true. I do. I actually recognise that apparently I can't just work all year long and only have one summer holiday. So I don't really know what I'm going to do about that. But it has become apparent that I'm not 18 anymore. Fuck's sake. And I am not coping with not resting and burning hot and hard all of the time. So yeah, I don't know how I'm going to get through the next 18 days. I don't know how I'm going to write the book. I don't know how I'm going to launch a book. Oh God. I don't know how I'm going to write a keynote. I don't know. Oh God, you're going to think I'm absolutely bonkers, but I am kind of delirious today. I had to take a nap, guys. Guys, I took a nap. Like, if that is not a signal that I'm really tired, I don't know what is. I just am so cross that I keep coming back to this place and that I can't seem to just sort my shit out and allow myself to do less. Like, I'm not even reading. This is a problem. I need to read more because, and I know the facts that I need to read more in order to be able to output more. I'm just not doing it. And anyway, look, I'm going to be fine after I have had a holiday. Let's just hope that this crazy jam-packed holiday that I've organised is restful. It's not going to be restful. Oh fuck. Anyway, I sound completely bonkers, so I'm just going to move on. Suffice to say that when this comes out, because it is the 2nd of July today, it is going to be the 10th of July when this airs, which is just 1 week away from the launch of my second vampire book, House of Crimson Kisses, and I am so close to a pre-order, a big, huge pre-order goal. If you do like fantasy romance and you love vampires, please do pre-order, because I will like absolutely shit my pants if I hit this goal. So yeah, go have a look. I'll leave the links in the show notes. All right, let's move on to less delirious things. The rebel of the week this week is Cassie. Cassie says, I've worked in a corporate position that demands seriousness and conformity for the last 25 years. Recently, I applied for a temporary role in another department to pivot my career. In preparation for my interview, which required a PowerPoint presentation, I faced questions that called for insights to marketing newsletters and entrepreneurial spirit, an aspect I've developed through my indie authorship. Until then, I had kept these two facets of my life distinctly separate, fearing that merging them could jeopardise or taint my career. Faced with a role that could redefine my professional identity, I decided to embrace the entirety of my skill sets. During my presentation and interview, I leveraged both my corporate experience and indie authorship, crafting a narrative that showcased my unique blend of skills. Thrilled, the panel appreciated my diverse talents and the fresh perspectives I brought. This experience was a revelation. My self-imposed barriers had been limiting my potential. I was offered the new role the next day. This act of rebellion against my own limitations not only secured me the role, but also marked a transformative phase in my life. It made me realise how much more creativity I want in my day job. How I've limited the risks I would take on the corporate side. Embracing this full spectrum of abilities has led to a grander professional fulfillment than I've had in quite some time. My leadership and colleagues have been incredibly supportive, affirming that hiding parts of who I am was necessary. While I don't often blast my indie authorship at work, recognising the direct correlation between the skills from my writing and those required in my corporate role has been enlightening. This journey has not only made me happier, but also demonstrated the value of being an indie author across various industries. So I suppose that sometimes the barriers we must break through in our rebellions are those we have imposed on ourselves, especially when we want to take new risks. In my case, it was a good move to being sassy and rebellious. I love that. I love that it was a self-imposed limitation that you rebelled against as well. I think often we are our own strength and our own weakness, and most of life is about battling those inner demons. And I just think this is such a wonderful example of that. We are super low on rebellions. So please, 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 if you have some rebellions, do send them in. It can be any kind of rebellion, something big, something small, or something in between. You can email your rebel story to Becca over on rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. No new patrons this week, but a huge thank you to all of my existing patrons. If you would like to support the show and join the Patreon community, then you can. And you'll get early access to all of the episodes, as well as bonus content like the Rebel Readers Masterclasses. The next class I'm teaching is on sex scenes, both spicy and clean. And we have our regular monthly poison and prose sessions, as well as our Slack community group. So if you would like to do that, then you can by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. This episode is sponsored by Pro Writing Aid, but rather than me tell you all about them, I'm going to let Lynn tell you all about why she uses Pro Writing Aid.
Pro Writing Aid isn't just for your manuscript. Don't get me wrong, it's great for that, but it's also for your website content, your newsletter, and your social media posts. You can copy and paste any text into the web editor or use one of its many software integrations so you can edit anything and everything you ever type. Because let's face it, you can't really copy edit your own work. You miss something. And I, for one, am fed up of crafting my messaging, hitting tweet, and immediately spotting the typo. There's nothing left to do then but curse the Twitter gods for not giving us an edit button. Pro Writing Aid is an editing tool for formal reports to Instagram posts. Not only does it help with catching those annoying typos, but it flags when I've slipped into using passive voice, and it suggests fixes and explains the problem so that I can learn for the future and write better content.
Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author Podcast. Today I'm joined by Sue Campbell. Sue is a book marketing and mindset coach who has helped hundreds of writers, from newbies to bestsellers, transform their inhibitive mindset around marketing and realize their full potential as authors. Her clients have exponentially increased their email lists and book sales, landed articles in prestigious publications such as the New York Times, done guest spots on popular podcasts, and much more. Hello and welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
No, thank you for coming on. So would you like to tell everyone a little bit about you and your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I knew I wanted to be a writer since I was 7 years old, and we got assigned to write a short story in second grade. And then I spent approximately the next 25-ish years running away very fast from actually doing the work that it takes to be a writer.
Which is quite a lot as well.
Yeah, quite a lot of work, yes. And very scary work in some instances. So I would dabble a little bit here and there, and I would get really serious about it, and I would make story notes, and then it would, fall off a cliff again. And then when I had my first child, I was like, oh, shit. Like, if I want this kid to be able to live his dreams, then I have to be the one modeling that for him.
Oh, that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, it hits you like a ton of bricks, right?
Yeah.
It's a very clear epiphany when it happens. And so I started making these little pivots and these little shifts, and started, mommy blogging, because that was right there in front of me. Then I started writing for parenting magazines, started freelancing, and basically pivoted and became a freelance writer and a copywriter on the side. That led me to, on a summer vacation from my golden handcuffs day job for a local government. Yes, I had
That's literally my story. I was also,
oh my God.
I was also in local government, and they felt like golden handcuffs. And we used that phrase as well, because I also lived in key worker property. So my rent was really low. So I was super stuck where I was because I couldn't afford, I'd gone, obviously, anyway, oh my God, this is very spooky.
This is I love it. It's because it's really hard. Then how hard it is to break away from something like that. So it took me about 7 years, from the time my kid was born to the time that I actually started, broke away completely. So that I ended up writing a draft of a novel while I was on a vacation. And my 6-year-old at the time was like project managing me. I was like, Mom, this is great. Go write some more. Mom, this is great. Go write some more. And then when it came time to start marketing the book, I had been listening to the Story Grid podcast for the craft piece of it to figure out how all of that and how to turn this draft that I wrote in a week into something like actually worth publishing. And Tim Grahl was the host of the podcast. And I remember realizing that his job was book marketing. And I was like, wow, that doesn't sound good at all. Like, I want no part of that. And then slowly that shifted for me. And I'm like, look, I'm writing copy for banks and spectroscopy companies. And I could be applying all of those content marketing and copywriting skills to helping authors get their books out. And I could make my entire career about writing my own books and helping other people get their books out. And I was just on fire from that point on. So I trained personally with Tim Grahl, consumed everything that he had ever made, and then went to Nashville and trained with him intensively for a week and never looked back, right? But again, I pivoted from shifting away from my freelancing and into just being all about book marketing. So I've been doing that since 2018. So I left my job with my Golden Handcuffs job in 2015 when my second kid was born. And then been book marketing since 2018. And all I want to do for the rest of my life is coach writers and write self-help books for writers. That's it.
That's so no fiction.
I still have a fiction novel that's about 98% there. I'm fine with it being where it is and keeping it in a drawer for now. I keep the door open. I'm perfectly happy to change my mind. But right now, like, the energy for me is so much on the mindset work that we need as writers to be able to do all of the things that are required, all that hard work that we alluded to.
Yeah, I love that. That is so unbelievably spooky. So I spent 8 years in corporate. What
were you doing? I was a business systems analyst. What were you doing?
Very similar. I was a project manager. However, my role was to go in and fix failing departments and basically restructure all their processes, restructure the departments, fix problems, find inefficiencies, make them better.
Very similar.
Yeah, very, very similar. And I knew 6 months in I'd made a mistake, but I was then in handcuffs because I was on a corporate graduate management scheme, like a kind of fast track into management. So I was stuck for 2 years, and then I had to give 2 years afterwards because they made us do a master's, even though I already went with a master's, which was really annoying. So I then had to do a second master's degree. And then I was stuck there basically. So 6 months in, I knew it was a mistake, was stuck for 4 years. And then it took me another 4, basically financially, to get out.
Yep.
So that's so crazy. I don't think I've ever met anybody with quite as close of a story as that. I've met a couple who have had similar-ish, but that is wild.
That is spooky. That's spooky. And I was working with SAP. So Joanna Penn, I know, has similar, like, she was a business systems analyst. She was working for like Deloitte or something. I was working for a city government, and I got pulled into a software implementation project as a business systems analyst. So I'm not mad that it happened, because I gained so many skills that I use to this day, right? In systems thinking, in managing people, in, just like taking bold risks and understanding the ups and downs of a project, right? So I gained a ton of skills that I need today, but it was also really hard to finally snip, use the wire cutters on the golden handcuffs.
I don't.
And now I'm making more than I was before, right? So I had all these catastrophic thoughts about how, oh my God, I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my marriage. Yep. I'm so irresponsible. And I'm better off now than I was then.
Oh, totally. 100%. I'm like, I can't even multiple times what I was earning at that point. But it's taken so long to get here, but also we would never have got here if we hadn't taken that brave step. And I honestly think that is the most terrifying thing I've ever done, in my whole career, that moment. And that moment is still such a visceral memory, because it's the do or die, and you have no idea if you're going to fail.
Right.
Okay. Well, I think maybe we'll talk a little bit more maybe about some of that mindset stuff, but
Yeah.
But first of all, let's talk about reader personas. Like,
Mhm.
what are they? Why should we bother making one? Why are they important? And how do we use it?
Yeah. So a reader persona is literally the foundational tool. It's one of the first things I want people to understand. So first I give them like the big picture of a strategy, but then your next step is figuring out who your ideal reader is, because knowing that can help you make every other marketing decision that you're going to have to make as an author. Right? Everything from like, what does your website need to look like? What copy needs to be on your website? What does your book cover need to look like? What's the jacket copy going to be? How are you going to find an audience, right, that somebody else has built that you can get in front of that has the right people in it so that you can pull them over to your audience? I mean, literally, I can't think of a marketing decision that you have to make as a writer where you don't need to know who your ideal reader is. So when people are spinning out, when authors are like, I'm not selling books, I don't know what to do, I don't know what the next step is, I always want to ground them in, who are you looking for? Who are you writing for? We need to know really clearly who that is before we can take a step forward and make some of these other decisions and grow your author business.
Do you think people get it wrong? Like, do they come to you with an
Yes.
incorrect? Okay, so why do you think that happens?
Well, one of the things that they get wrong is that they just don't understand the assignment. They're like, oh, it's just any woman who loves fiction between the age of 35 and 65. Right? That's not enough detail to help you make any concrete decision, right? It's just way too broad. So when I'm helping someone write a reader persona, I want you to write it like you're going to put this person into a novel, right? It's a character sketch where you want to know this person, not just their demographics, are they married? Where do they get their news? But also their psychographics. What's their worldview? Why are they going to fiction? Right? Why, or nonfiction, if you're a nonfiction writer, doesn't matter. You still need to know your ideal reader. Like, what are they trying to get out of this? Where are they fitting it into their lives? Like, how can you talk to them in a way where they will understand that this book is one that will perfectly align with what they're looking for?
Okay.
Right. So go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering, should we put this into practice and maybe talk about my readers so that people can understand and practice an example? I think that might help kind of like make it tangible for people. So I write lesbian fantasy romance. The majority of my readers are in their 30s. I do have younger readers, but obviously because I'm writing 18 plus fiction, I would say usually they're over 25, I would say. I would say they're quite liberal and on the socialist end of things because they are queer and therefore they have been discriminated against and faced homophobia and all that kind of stuff. What else? Oh, so go on, let's dig into this so that people can understand. What else do I need to know? They use TikTok, most of them.
Right. Okay, so they use TikTok. So who are they following on TikTok?
Okay, that's a good question. Who are they following? Well, they're book readers. So quite a lot of them are following either BookTokers, queer BookTokers, or they're following other authors, I would say. There's probably a few people, there's probably quite a few like gay icons as well. So there'll be people on there. There's an Italian lesbian, for example, who was the housemaid, I want to say. That's probably an incorrect term, but she was a housekeeper was the word. Housekeeper in a brand new reality show called I Kissed a Girl. So it's like that kind of like not A-list celebrity like Ruby Rose, for example, but more like, sort of C-list, Z-list, maybe people from like the L Word they'd be following, any kind of gay icon, maybe Pink News, that's like an LGBT news channel on there, that kind of stuff, I reckon. Is that what you're kind of...
Okay. Yeah, so you got like you're tighter than most people that I talk to, but you can take it even tighter because what I want you to do is whenever you're facing a question is give her a name, right? So let's give her a name. What's her name?
I don't know. What's a really lesbian name?
I know. As writers, we can spend like 4 hours thinking of a name. Right?
Oh no. Tara. Let's just say Tara.
Okay. So Tara, how old is she actually? Like
34.
Okay, 34. Is she in a relationship?
Yes.
Okay. For how long?
Probably upwards of 5 years. Lesbians commit quite quickly, so they usually, and they also are very monogamous. Here's the other thing. I think a lot of the lesbians that read my books are extremely sexually open, and probably socially are unable to express that or discuss it. I don't, that's like a weird one to, but because obviously their sexual dynamic is not socially acceptable because we're queer, you know, it's not like you can just go out with your mates when they're all talking about their husbands lasting 3 minutes or whatever. Sorry, men.
Right.
But you know what I mean, right? Like that's the kind of conversations I overhear from, you know, my female straight friends.
Right.
Yeah, so I would say that's probably another dynamic to add.
Okay.
Hopefully this is helping listeners as well,
it is.
right? Yeah.
I think it will, because a concrete example of how we do it, because like me asking these questions of you at home, if you're listening, you can answer these questions for yourself and your ideal reader. So then, okay, so her name's Tara. She's 34. She's been in a relationship for 5+ years. She's sexually open in terms of what she wants to hear about and read about. What does she do for a living?
Oh, probably something. Oh, I don't know. Something corporate, I would have thought.
Okay.
I reckon they've got a good job.
Okay, so good job. So decent income. How much do you think she makes a year?
Oh my God. No
Let's
idea.
just make her. We should make her a business systems analyst.
Yeah, fuck it. Let's do that. Yeah. Business systems analyst. Exactly.
Okay, so in the US, maybe they're making, you know, $100,000 a year.
Probably
I don't know what
half,
it would be in the
half
UK.
that in the UK. I would have thought 50 grand a year, probably. Yeah, because we earn less in the UK.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. But we also don't pay for medical care, so you know, swings and roundabouts.
Yeah. We, you know, our favorite way to go into bankruptcy is medical bills.
I know. It's horrible.
Okay, so she's got disposable income to some extent, right? That she spends on entertainment. So how many books do you think she reads a month?
I'd say that I have two distinct audiences. I have more casual readers who might read 1 to 3, and then I have whale readers who are reading like 10 plus.
Okay, this is great. So for the purposes of an ideal reader persona, we want the whale.
Yeah.
Right?
And I definitely have a group of whale readers for sure.
Okay. So let's say 10 per month. And then tell me what her format is. Is she reading Kindle? Is she doing print, audiobook?
So that question I think is really interesting, because I think we as indie authors have the power to change that, not because of the reader, but because of how we do marketing. So, for example, if I have a post go viral on TikTok that is for my Girl Games series, which are in Kindle Unlimited, my percentage of KU goes up. On average, my percentage of KU is like 11% of my income, which is extraordinarily low for an author who has books in KU. And the reason for that is the majority of my traffic and readers come from TikTok, where they are very visual and therefore want physical copies. However, I also have a huge portion of like ADHD readers who all love audio, or dyslexic. Like my wife is dyslexic. She always reads in audio. And it is the number one question I get asked. Do you have it in audio? Do you have it in audio? Do you have it in audio? So I would say it is probably paper, audio, ebook in that order, I think, but it will depend on how I've done marketing.
Okay, I love that. That's so good to know. Also, should we be making Tara ADHD? Do you think she's that's representative of a lot of your readers?
I think no, I don't think it's necessarily just ADHD. I think it's neurospicy,
neurodivergent.
Yeah, because I think I don't know if it's because I'm a little bit neurospicy and therefore my TikTok is trained to show content and give content to me that's neurospicy. Therefore, I've picked up neurospicy readers. But I just think people who are queer are more open and accepting and tolerant of any kind of difference. And therefore, we are more likely to recognize those symptomatic things that happen to people who are neurospicy. And therefore, we're more likely to be tested, more likely to be aware of that. So, yeah, I think that's probably why that happens.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, this is so much more in depth than I realized.
Right. Okay. So here is something that we want to look at, because right now there's a certain portion of the audience who's listening and going, why are you being this specific? Why are you going to leave all of these other people out? And the fact is, we're not. We're not leaving anybody out. We're not leaving some straight guy out who wants to read this, right? Like, we are honing in on the person who's going to get it and freak out because they love it so much and tell their friends, tell everyone in their queer community, and they're going to help do the marketing for us. We want to target the people who are going to be our word of mouth evangelists.
Right. And if we can tweak our content, our books, and our like what we're creating to be exactly what they want, then we please them more, I guess, and then create that cycle of,
Yes, exactly. And of course, we always want to make sure that we're in alignment with the kind of things that we want to be writing to. I'm not one of those book marketers who's just going to be like, just write whatever anybody wants, right? I want you to have a good time and be a lot like, where's the Venn diagram overlap between what you love to write and that ideal reader who's like so happy to read it. So because that creates that virtuous cycle.
When we've got this profile, like what is it that we do with it? So obviously I have just said, oh yeah, so then I can like tweak stuff and, make it even better for those readers. But how do listeners do that? Like once they've written down all of this information, what is the next step? How do you utilize it?
So the best way to utilize it, like as we talked about, all those little ways and all of the materials that you're making that are going to be forward facing, you want to speak as if you're writing it just for that ideal reader. So your book jacket copy, your website copy, your email to your email subscribers, all like have Tara in mind where you're writing it for Tara. Because there is power in specificity. We know this as fiction writers, right? When we're being really detailed and concrete and specific, it resonates so much more than when we're just talking in generalities or being vague. It's the same thing for the ideal reader. Other people will pick up on it. And even though they're not the ideal reader, it's compelling because it's written for that ideal reader, so they can't look away. Right. So it's very magnetizing, even for people who don't fit that exact profile. But the most powerful way that you can use this is by figuring out where that person is in the world, who has already built an audience of people like that, who are the influencers for Tara. And that's what you naturally did when we started talking about it. You're like, oh, on TikTok, they would be following all of these gay icons or all the people who are, not necessarily the A-list people, but further down. You already started intuitively thinking like that because you're an incredibly smart business person.
Oh,
right?
Shucks.
But it's like, then that's the audience that I have to get in front of. Too often, writers have a mentality of, I'm just going to build it and they will come, right? So I'm going to put on my website, I'm going to offer something for my email list, and it's just going to magically attract all of these people. And it's far more effective and efficient to be like, who already has my people? And then I go and get in front of this person and then do my thing, talk about what I talk about, and all the people who are in that audience who will be attracted to it, I can then invite them to a call to action back over to join my audience, right? To subscribe to my email list and of course to buy my books.
Okay, so a tricky question.
Yeah.
What happens when you are filling a hole in a market, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say, for example, you realize that there are very, very few adult fantasy romance books for lesbians. There's lots and lots of young adult stuff, lots and lots of sweet romance, lots and lots of contemporary, but nobody, or maybe not nobody, less than 5 people are doing this. Mm-hmm. So there aren't many other kind of peers or I guess comp authors that could be influencers. Like, how do you still follow the same method? Like how?
Yeah. So This is a great question because you're mapping a little bit too one-to-one in terms of influencers. You're like, well, then I just need to find the people who are exactly like me who've already built the audience. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people, maybe they're not even authors, but they have an audience. Maybe they're podcasters, right? Maybe they're, speakers, who knows? Maybe they're TV personalities, but they already have the audience of people. And you're going to go over and tell them what you do. So then in that case, what you would be looking for is that ideal reader. So hopefully, is it still Tara? If we're talking about the fantasy romance books for lesbians, still Tara, right? So you're like, okay, where is Tara already an audience? Not because it's about fantasy romance books for adults, but because it's about social justice for queer people, or because it's about, this other thing that she's interested in. Right. So you want like an influencer who's got Tara in their audience, but it doesn't have to map to a comp author necessarily.
How do
Does that
we
make
convince?
sense?
Yeah, it does. I suppose my question is, how would we convince somebody who isn't a book talker, but is an influencer in our sphere with the right audience to talk about our book or to accept a copy of our book when that isn't necessarily the type of content that they're putting out? That's, I suppose, where my query would come. So like there's another couple that I'm thinking of called Ali and Sam on Instagram, who are a lesbian couple who did IVF, and they did like the IVF mummy kind of journey. And funny enough, they are now writing a book. So I'm like, oh, maybe I'm going to send them a book package. But for example, let's say this Ali and Sam were not writing a book. Why, how, the chances of them being willing to be an influencer for something like a book is small, no? Because it's not the type of content that they put out.
Yeah, so this is where it gets really interesting, and we have to do our research for each and every influencer who we have in mind. So this is a great example because like maybe it would work and maybe it wouldn't. Let's explore a little bit. So who is in their audience? In Ali and Sam's audience, who do you think that audience is?
I definitely think it's the Taras of the world who want children. So there's going to be Taras who don't want kids and are happy just being, with their partners. And then there's going to be the Taras who at 34 are having kids. So the interesting thing about that is lesbians quite often have kids later. Whereas my wife and I had kids really, really young for lesbians. So all the people who we went to university with are only now having kids, and we're like 37 now, right? So like, I would say their audience is probably very similar. Like it would be the Taras of the world who want children.
Okay, so angle, and I'm just, as my friend Monica used to say, I'm just talking out loud here, right? We're just spitballing. You could, let's pretend, and again, I don't know about Sam and Ellie specifically, but let's say that they do a lot of Instagram lives, right? Like they have guests on to do Instagram lives. So you could pitch them and say, hey, I am a lesbian who had kids a lot earlier than you. You're on this journey, and here's what I want to teach you about being a lesbian mom. I want to give you the benefit of my knowledge because I am further ahead on this journey than you are of once your kid actually arrives. Right? You could do something like that. And in this instance, maybe you don't necessarily spend the whole time talking about fantasy romance books for writers, but it's in your bio. You can weave it naturally into the story. You can talk about, transitioning your career like we just did. And as long as you're hitting those points enough, you can talk about something different. There may also be ways that we can be like, let's say you get put on bed rest. What should you be reading while you're in bed, right? You just brainstorm the shit out of it for each influencer. But let's say, for example, because we have to know like when to pitch and when not to pitch. The classic example is I had a client who was very type A, like go-getter. And we were doing pitching for her of influencers, and she jumped the gun and reached out to this person who has a podcast, who's a great big influencer, who I happen to follow and be a huge admirer of. And so she pitched him to be on his podcast. He never, ever, ever has guests. He has a very specific format for his podcasts, right? And so she demonstrated by pitching him that she doesn't actually listen to the podcast. Right. So it's our job as the people who are doing the pitching to do our due diligence and figure out like, how can I make this a win-win and respect what they already do? I'm not going to ask somebody to, do something way outside of what they normally do. For me, that's not a win-win for them. That's asking them to do a whole bunch of work. So your job would be like, okay, I'm going to scour Sam and Allie's Instagram and figure out, well, how have they worked with other people? Do they ever do book recommendations, right? And just start brainstorming ideas of what you could pitch. And their job as an influencer is to serve their audience. So how are you going to help them accomplish that mission? If you can make a clear pitch that,
So,
hey,
like,
this is...
spice up your love life after you've had kids, like lesbian love life after you've had kids.
Yes.
Yeah. This isn't my first radio.
No, not at all. But, right. And so people at home listening, right? Like, put yourself in this situation, pick an influencer who pops into your mind, right? Sam and Allie was like right at the forefront of your thoughts. Be like, okay, I think this person has a bunch of people in my audience. Now it's my job. This is like a whole other discussion about pitching and doing outreach, but it all comes back to the reader persona. And if you don't have a reader persona, you're going to be at a complete loss on where you should be concentrating your efforts to find influencers and to get in front of them, because you're just like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Right. So you want to saturate, like, you figure out who Tara is, then you saturate all of the places where Tara would be. And now all of a sudden, every time Tara turns around, like the real life equivalent of Tara is like, oh my God, there's Sasha again. There's this woman again. There's this woman again. There's this woman again. I'm just going to join her goddamn list because she's everywhere.
I've definitely had a few people say on TikTok, oh my God, this is like the 100th time I've seen this book on my feed. I think it's time to buy it. And I'm like, I am that relentless. I will just keep going until you buy the fucking book.
Exactly. And that's exactly the right attitude.
One of the things that you mentioned was that people make mistakes by pitching too early before they've really understood who they're pitching. Are there any other kind of common mistakes that you see authors making, either when creating a reader persona or like in their marketing, kind of in this sort of strategic marketing specifically?
Reader persona wise, I also see people get too locked in, right? So you create the reader persona and you're really married to the idea of who this person is, and you're getting like data from the outside that's actually saying, you're getting a lot of people who match this profile, which is different. And they like are really locked in and they're not willing to renegotiate with themselves about who their ideal reader is. So make sure that you're still tuned in to signals that you're getting from the outside world. There may be an additional reader persona, or you may just have it wrong. We start out with a really educated guess, but it's going to be shaped over time by what we're seeing happening, with the data and with the people who email us and people who are commenting on TikTok and all of those things. So be willing to shift. I also see, in terms of overall strategy, what I most often see is people not being willing to do the outreach. Right? They'll say, I did all the things. I've got a website and I have an email list and I'm offering a reader magnet for people who join my email list, and I'm not selling any books and no one's joining. And I'm like, well, how much outreach are you doing? Right? That's the key ingredient, is you have to get out there. You have to get in front of the audience, right? Move people from not knowing you exist to now knowing that you exist, giving them a sample of what you're about, and then inviting them back over to that email list. We're not building a digital spider web here and only relying on people to kind of stumble into the digital spider web. We've got to be willing to go out and find those people for ourselves. So those are the two biggest issues that I see. And of course, the reason people don't do outreach is because it's scary.
That was literally my next question. Why do you think people won't do it?
Because it's terrifying, because you're for sure going to get ignored and you're for sure going to get people telling you no. And human beings do not like to experience either of those things. And this is why I am fundamentally a mindset coach, right? Like, to be totally honest with you, I don't care about marketing at all. I care about helping writers make the impact that they want to make and get over their own shit so they can actually do that. Right? So I am all about the mindset. So you have to be willing to be uncomfortable in the pursuit of this and know that your comfort zone will expand as you do this. And you have to be willing to, this is too long of a pause for a podcast. Sorry.
No, you're all right.
We just we've got to be willing to override our own natural instincts, right? Your brain wants to keep you safe. It wants to keep you efficient, and it wants instant gratification.
Get out the comfort zone.
Yes, you've got to get out of the comfort zone. And if you're not willing to do that, it's just not going to work. Then just write for your own pleasure, and like, that's fine. But know that you're missing out on so much personal growth, right? Like, getting out there and marketing your books is just this like personal growth bullet train, right? It will bring up all your shit so that you can work with it, and you will become someone who you maybe don't even recognize 5 or 10 years from now, because your comfort zone is so far expanded.
Yeah, well, isn't that the truth? Okay, let's talk about social media. So once we have this reader persona, what do we do on social media? How do we use it? How do we, what role does social media, that's probably two different questions. Like, what role does social media play for us as authors in terms of finding these ideal readers, connecting with the ideal readers, turning them into buyers and then fans? Like, what is that system?
Well, I want to talk about that, putting TikTok aside for a minute. So TikTok's a bit of an anomaly at the moment. So let's pretend TikTok doesn't exist just for a moment. If we're talking about the other social media channels, their power to sell books is very low, like very low. If you are banking your entire strategy on being able to grow a big following on social media and then convert those followers into book buyers, you're going to be expending a ton of energy for not a lot of return. So I actually want the asset that you're working to build to be your email list of subscribers. You control that email list. The deliverability is far, far higher, right? All you have to do is go look on Twitter or X, right, for example, and be like, okay, Stephen King has 7 million followers. And then go look at one of his recent tweets, and they will show you how many views it got, like how many people actually saw it. And it is proportionately far, far lower than 7 million.
Yeah.
Right.
So there is a shift at the moment in social media where you used to have to have a lot of followers in order to be able to get any kind of views and be able to make any kind of money on social media. Whereas now it's all about the content. And you can go viral, as I did on, TikTok, but also Instagram with like hardly any followers, if you make content that people interact with. And that's really the game that we're playing now. There's always a game that's being played, and it's
and you have to be willing to stay on top. You have to be willing to stay on top of that game and ride that game. If you're the kind of person who loves doing that, great, go ahead and do that. Also have an email list, right? That is like a safety net, because once those people are on your list, yes, they can unsubscribe in onesies, twosies, but you're not as vulnerable to an algorithmic change. TikTok is a whole different ballgame for right now. I very much doubt that is going to last in its current form. Right. It may I think we're honestly, if I had to put my prognostication hat on, we're very close to the end of the way that it's been working. And you know more about it than I do, because you're all over it, right? And you've been doing very well.
The minute somebody starts monetizing ads, it's on the downslide. No, that's not true. Because you can still win at the advertising game if you get into the advertising early, but then the costs go up as people start to realize it works. So at the moment, we are at the end of the organic train, I would say.
Exactly. And so this is the pattern that we've seen a lot of social media companies do, where they let people build an audience, and the algorithm like rewards that growth and gives them, a lot of like organic juice, so to speak. And then they're like, okay, now we've built this up enough. Now we're going to take away that organic reach, and you have to pay to get that organic reach. That's certainly what has happened with Facebook and Instagram. And it's not fun. So actually what I think a really smart, long-term, consistent use of social media is, that I have not seen change yet, is it is a wonderful way to actually befriend and connect with influencers. So you can get close to people in ways that we were never able to get close to before, by developing a relationship, like a social, right? A social media, a social relationship. you can befriend those gay icons of the world, the ones who are still reachable and don't have just a social media team managing it all for them, by commenting, by resharing their things, by being like really genuine and having that rapport. One of my best friends in the world is someone I met on Twitter like 13 years ago. Right? You can still build those relationships. And then you can be like, hey, and can I be on your podcast? Or hey, do you want to do a book giveaway with me? So having those kinds of interactions are still possible, and you don't need any advertising dollars to do it. And those relationships that you build will pay off over time.
Building relationships is extremely time expensive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How much time should people... Okay, you might not be able to say, oh, it needs to be 36 hours and 3 minutes, you know, right? But like proportionately, how much of their time should they be spending doing this versus just writing the next book?
I think you always, as an author, get to decide that. And I would say that the quality of the people who you're choosing to focus on, right? And again, this sounds a little like transactional and gross, but I don't want it to be. I want you to pick people who you actually think are super cool and you want to have a relationship with. And then you want to spend your time. Well, that's what I hear a lot from writers is like, but I'm an introvert and I hate people. You don't hate all the people. That's why you're like have a superpower of being selective. It's extroverts who want to like relate to anybody and everybody where their energy is going to be dispersed. Right. So a lot of times people will present something to me as the like a negative or a problem when actually, if you flip it the other way, it's a solution. So if you're very picky about people and you generally don't like them, it's going to be really easy for you to make decisions about, oh, that person is actually decent. Right. Mm-hmm. So then you're like, okay, great. You just saved a ton of time on being able to focus on who you want to focus on. So I would definitely stay using social media to build relationships with some key influencers. You get to choose how much time you spend and you can adjust that over time. Again, I'm never one of those marketers who thinks that marketing should overtake your writing time, but I'm also going to call you out as a coach on your bullshit of like, I can't possibly write a book and do any marketing at the same time, right? Like, do you shower every day? Do you like cook for it? Like,
no, it's so funny because right before this episode, I was texting my friend, like, I need to finish this fucking edit because I'm like editing a book and I'm finding it exceptionally difficult to be consistent at TikTok whilst editing. I have no problems doing it whilst drafting, but because editing is all decision making and all tweaking and refinement, it's like, for me, I know this is not the same for every author, but for me, it's super taxing. And it's just sapping all my creativity for social media. So yeah, like I don't know, like there are times for me when I find it really hard, but then, you know, the minute I stop and I get all that energy back, it's fine again. Okay.
Oh, I just want to mindset coach you on that right now, but we can go ahead if we need to.
No, go on, pull me out my bullshit.
Right. The exhaustion comes from thoughts in this particular case. Right. So I'm not saying you're going to flip a switch and feel completely different about editing, but as writers, we're really good at telling really dramatic stories to ourselves.
Right. So the way you life, darling.
The way you told that to me was very dramatic because that's what we're so damn good at. How do you drain some of the drama from the story? And you're just like, I am editing a book right now, and I am on TikTok right now. Solve for, right? Like, so what is your thought is that's very draining for me. There were some other thoughts in there. It's very draining for me.
I hate editing. Yeah, I hate editing, which is why I do it in a week, which is why I get so drained, right? Because I literally tunnel vision, do nothing other than edit the book intensively, and then it's done. So I spend a week and that's it, goes to the editor, and then I publish.
Well, I think that's a brilliant strategy, first of all, to work with, you know, your natural innate ability that you're feeling right now, right? So I'm all about the story you tell yourself. This is the book that I'm writing right now. So the story you tell yourself is, I hate editing. You don't necessarily even need to give that up, but we need to loosen its grip and not give it so much power. So tell me the reasons you love the results of editing.
I
Why is it
mean,
worth doing? Why is it worth doing?
well, because I want to get the next book out. I can't get the book out without doing the editing. So, I mean, it has to be done. Funny enough, um, rather than changing my frame of reference, what it did make me realize is that actually I probably ought to batch a load of TikToks before I start editing, because
Brilliant.
then I've got all of the I've done all of the creativity before I then go into having to do the edits. Because no, I am joking about, I it's my least favorite part of the process. I would rather
Mm-hmm.
mark it all day long than I would edit
Mm-hmm.
the book.
Mm-hmm.
And that is literally because of the cocktail of my Clifton Strengths. I don't know if you know Clifton Strengths.
I do know Clifton Strengths.
Oh my God, do you know your Clifton Strengths? Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Tell me everything. I want to know your top 10 immediately. What is your top 10?
Well, my top three, like within my top three is input and learner. So
Okay.
I am just constantly shoving information and learning into my head. I got to I'll pull up my other ones. But I want to get you a thought really quick before
Yeah.
we jump off of this topic about editing that you can still believe, because we're
Yeah.
not going to try to like blow sunshine up our own asses here, right? Like you can keep the I hate editing, but because you've set it up the way you have, you could also, instead of repeating the I hate editing in your head, like, this is almost done.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
almost done. This is only going to take a week.
So one of the things that my strengths coach has made me shift is that the goal, and I'll explain why goals are really important in a second because of Clifton Strengths, but the goal for me is no longer, the goal used to be finish the draft. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I have activator at 6, I think it is. And so once
Mm-hmm.
activator is done, we want to start the next thing. So what she's made me do is make the goal publishing, whereas publishing was everything I just did afterwards. And it just had to get done. And the goal always used to be drafting, which is why the reframe is now the editing is part of the goal, which is super hard, but does make me slightly more accepting of it.
Yes.
But yeah, so go on. Have you got them up?
Okay, I've got it. Okay, so number 1 is input. Number 2 is maximizer. Number 3 is learner. Number 4 will probably come as no surprise, is positivity. Number 5 is empathy. Number 6 is achiever. Number 7, I feel like I'm slowly taking off clothing as I read all these. Number 7 is intellection. Number 8 is strategic. Number 9 is activator. And number 10 is connectedness.
Okay, cool. So I'm competition number 1.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, right? And then, so I'm competition, achiever, strategic, learner, significance, activator, command, focus, input, self-assurance. So I'm all yellow, like 50% of my top 10 are yellow.
So fascinating. Did you notice, like in mine, the executing, right? So I've only got 1 for executing, and it's achiever.
But
so
that is
like,
such a powerhouse, though.
Exactly. So it's like, yeah, I'm so bad at like lawn maintenance and hair cutting and like all those things that take that executing over and over that don't matter, that don't mean anything, right? But if I need to do it to actually achieve something, then I can do those like maintenance type tasks.
Yeah. Oh, I love Clifton Strengths. It's completely changed my life. I'm utterly obsessed with them.
Love it.
Okay, what time are we at? Okay, so I think, before I kind of ask you then the ultimate podcast question, is there anything else you'd want to say to readers, kind of pulling it together, any last tips, anything that you kind of wish you'd known right at the beginning of the journey, maybe even marketing your own books and that kind of stuff? Yeah.
Well, reader persona wise, I just really want you to pretend like you're putting this person into a novel, give them a name, and then ask yourself about them at every stage, right? Like, would this person be on TikTok, or would this person be on Instagram, right? Would Tara be here? Would Tara be there? Would Tara listen to this? Would Tara listen to this podcast? So use it as a question for every decision that you make about your marketing. And then mindset wise, I would just like, really, if you're stuck either on a book or on something marketing related, write down all your thoughts about it and try to figure out what story you are telling yourself about it, and then shift yourself to a story that serves you better. Because the stories we tell ourselves create feelings. Our feelings are the fuel for our actions. So if there is an action that you're not taking, right? That you need to take. You've got to back it up and find the emotional fuel that comes from the story that you're telling yourself. And I'm writing a whole book about that right now.
Amazing. Well, this is the Rebel Author Podcast. So tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
Well, I really think it alludes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, where, I grew up in the US. There's a state called Minnesota, and it's very traditional, and everyone, like, my family is littered with nurses, right? You pick something safe and solid and reliable where you know the path. So just the fact that I had a golden handcuffs type job and was able to say, no, I'm going to go off on my own and do this was probably the most rebellious thing that I've ever done in my life. And it was fighting against my own nature, my own socialization. But I just felt this inner pull. Like I had that, it sounded like you did too, that how did I get here? Like, whoops, this was a big mistake. And now how do I pivot myself to get back on the track where I know that I need to be? So that was probably my most rebellious act. But then a little bit of rebellion this morning is my husband made this coffee cup and my son painted it, and it's got David Bowie on it from Ziggy Stardust. And I'm not supposed to use it, but I am having my tea in it right now while I'm not here.
I love it. That is a cheeky rebellion. I love both those rebellion. And the fact that it's brought you to a place of joy as well, which I actually think, and I say this all the time on the show, but that's what I think is at the heart of rebellion, is making a change so that we can seek the joy that we really need.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a mindset book in there that I should write somewhere about rebellion.
Yes, you absolutely should.
Okay, well, tell everyone where they can find out more about you, your books, and anything else you'd like to add.
So you can find out more about me and join my newsletter, most importantly, because I have a lot of resources for writers, both on mindset, marketing, and craft, pagesandplatforms.com. And when you sign up for the newsletter, I'll send you a bunch of cool stuff. And also be on the lookout for the Write Anyway Summit, which is something that we do every fall. Starting last year was our first year. And it's basically all mindset focused to help you get around all the things that we think are obstacles to getting our writing and marketing done. And Sasha, I would love to invite you to be a speaker this year.
Oh, let's talk about that afterwards.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your time. And of course, a huge thank you to all of the show's listeners and all of the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You were listening to Sue Campbell, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. Next week, I'm joined by Lara Ferrari, and we're going to be talking all about Instagram, marketing, and author archetypes. So join me next week for that. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.